Hey, and welcome to the Ambitious Bookkeeper podcast. I'm Serena Shoup. I am a CPA and mom of three, and I'm running a virtual bookkeeping business mostly from my home. You're in the right place if you're a bookkeeper, accountant, or an accounting student, and you know that your purpose is bigger than sitting in a cubicle. If you're ready to learn some actionable tips and strategies to help you start and grow a bookkeeping or accounting business, I hope you stick around. Welcome back to the Ambitious Bookkeeper podcast. This lovely episode is brought to you by me as usual, but I have another guest and his name is Steven. He's actually a local CPA here where I'm at in Prescott, Arizona, and we met at a young professionals networking event. So Steven, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So hi, Serena. Hello to your audience there. If you have other accountants and tax professionals, I'm sure that we're all just exhaling right now because we just finished a tax season and got through another one. I'm certainly excited that it's over. I took yesterday and I went out and did some camper shopping. So I want to buy a camper so that I can go out and do some camping with my family this summer. So excited about that. But it was a good tax season, and yeah, I'd met Serena a couple months ago, so I'm looking forward to conversation with you.
Yeah, continuing our conversation. It was a little tricky having a business conversation with all the noise. Was there a DJ or a band? It was kind of loud in there. It was kind of
It might have been a little loud.
Yeah.
But we started getting into some good topics. We're like, okay, yeah, I know. Yeah. This is my experience with this. And it's like, all right. And then you mentioned the podcast. I was like, I'd like to share some of my insights if I could with you then.
Yeah. So definitely, I love being able to connect with other accountants. And it was really awesome to be able to connect with someone local that is kind of on the same page, same wavelength as far as mindset and just doing things a little bit differently. And I knew you would be a huge value add for the podcast for our audience, as a lot of people that listen are maybe still in public accounting or in corporate and have a CPA license or working toward a CPA license. And it just seems like there's not a lot of younger professional CPAs out there sharing their experience, especially when it comes to starting firms and things like that. So having you here to talk about that is going to be awesome. So my first question for you is, can you share a little bit about your journey of why you became a CPA, how you started out, and what brought you here basically?
Okay. So, originally it was just, I didn't know that I wanted to be an accountant. I didn't have any, parents or other family members that were CPAs, but I took my first accounting course, and one of my professors like, okay, well, if you want to make some good money and you want to be in high demand for the rest of your life, become a CPA, I remember him saying something to the effect of, when you start your business, or if you ever decide to start a business, really all you have to do is hang a shingle out, and clients will come and people will want to, people will want to employ you for your services. And so I thought, what, I want to go into a degree where I could actually learn a trade by the time I graduated from school. And I think to a certain extent you do learn a trade, but obviously, as most of you know, where you really learn how to do this work is on the job. And from there, I went right into public accounting once I graduated from college. I ended up working originally for a local firm down in the Phoenix area. It had about 15 to 20 employees at the time.
Okay, yeah, that was going to be my question. Was it a smaller firm or regional? Not a big four, right?
Not a big four. Okay, although I did go to work for PwC a little later on in my career as well.
What did you base that decision off of? Because I know a lot of accounting programs, they really push you to being prepared for being recruited by one of these big four firms. Did you have that on your radar, or did you kind of always know that you didn't really, because I have my story behind that too, but what was your take on that?
Well, I'd been working for this company for, I don't know, maybe about 4 years time. And I'd gotten my CPA license, and I was just kind of looking for something new, something exciting, just to change things up a little bit. And at that time, it was like 2012 or 13. A lot of the big four were actually changing some of their strategies where they were looking for more experienced professionals. And so they brought me on as a experienced associate, is what they call it. So it's an associate that has experience in public accounting, And so that was kind of the direction that they were going. And I was in audit. So I started my career in audit. So my first 4 years was audit. When I went to PwC, that was all in audit as well.
Okay. And now do you do audit at your firm that you own?
We do, but I started off as a tax firm. So when I started my company, SC Audit and Accounting Solutions, I started it off as a tax and accounting consulting firm. And that was the original idea. In fact, when I first started the company, I was like, oh, I would just thought it was just going to be myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously things have changed a lot since then. But at any rate, we started off doing tax work. And it wasn't until maybe 2.5, 3 years ago, I had a tax manager from another firm, or I'm sorry, an audit manager from another firm that wanted to come and join me and bring on a book of business. And so I said, okay, let's do it. And so I, had that person join the firm. And so I've been working with them as kind of the audit manager. And it's kind of a small time, aspect of my business, but we do have an audit practice.
Okay. Awesome. And the bulk of your business is still tax, is it?
Yeah, tax and accounting, consulting, and then some audit mixed in with it. And we do provide bookkeeping services as well. That's part of the service that we provide to our clients.
Yeah. So
I'm not skipping ahead too far.
No, it's cool. Do you consider bookkeeping the same as client accounting services? I like to get like a CPA firm owner take.
Yeah.
To just kind of see, because there's a lot of different terminology floating around out there.
Well, I would say that bookkeeping gets you all the way up to the point of the month-end close. And then client accounting services would be, the services that you're providing from, hey, all the books are reconciled. Now we need to do the actual accounting and potentially produce financial statements. Mm-hmm. And so that's the client accounting services. And so I certainly feel like that goes to that next level.
Yeah. Do most of your bookkeeping engagement clients also utilize the accounting piece, like the financial statements and things like that?
Some of them do. Mm-hmm. And it's some of them, it's more of a month end, monthly financial statement that we produce for our clients. And then others, it might be just a year-end tax return that we're doing the accounting for. So yeah. we just shore up all the accounting really at the end of the year to make sure that we can prepare a tax return.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear like kind of behind the scenes of everyone's interpretations of things, because like I own a bookkeeping firm. Don't really, I could call it an accounting firm because I'm a CPA, but I have a whole reason why I don't. But what I'm actually providing is client accounting services and like higher level stuff. So it's very interesting to hear like what people consider what. And then it always depends on how you're really like communicating and educating the client on what it is that you do. Kind of doesn't really matter what you call it.
And that's what interested me in you. When we talked the other day, you'd mentioned, hey, yes, I provide bookkeeping services, but I'm also a CPA. And so I understand all the actual accounting. And so a lot of times our bookkeeping clients, or some of our clients that might come to us, they may have had a bookkeeper, but they didn't necessarily have an accountant.
Yeah.
And so we might get the books and banks are reconciled, but the accounting is not done. Mm-hmm. And that's just something that can really be missed. And it's tough. I would say that, because I think there's a lot of people out there says, oh, hey, you want to become a bookkeeper? And you can easily become a bookkeeper, but can you really become an accountant? And do you have the people around you that know the accounting, who can actually train you? And that's part of, I guess, some of the value add that my firm has provided, is because we are CPAs as well. So we have bookkeepers, but we help them take that work from the bookkeeping level to the accounting level as well.
Yeah. So a second ago, you mentioned the books are reconciled, but the accounting might not be done. There might be some things missed. So do you have some examples of things that you found missed, so that like if a bookkeeper is listening, they could be like, oh, I can look for that and not make that mistake?
I think so. Probably one of the more common areas that can get missed would be your long-term debts, making sure that you're really reconciling your long-term debts. Sometimes we'll see that maybe the interest hasn't been properly allocated for your notes that are on the books. Deferred revenues, things like that. If you don't really understand what deferred revenues are, if they're cash versus accrual basis. The fixed assets component is something that's frequently missed and difficult to deal with, because you're really trying to reconcile your fixed assets on your books to your fixed asset manager or the program that's managing your fixed assets. And a lot of times for us, that is our tax software. Our tax software is what is going to dictate the depreciation and the balancing of those fixed asset accounts. And so I guess those would be a couple of areas that we would see, that do get missed quite frequently. And then maybe some classification issues on the profit and loss. You got to be really careful with that as well.
Yeah.
What about you? So do you have some areas where it's like when you're working with entry-level bookkeepers that they struggle with a little more than others?
Yeah, I would say a common area of potential weaknesses, and not all bookkeepers, but a lot of the bookkeepers I've mentored feel very unsure about the balance sheet. So we've been talking a lot about that lately. And like you said, that's all the debt, the fixed assets, maybe inventory, things like that, and really getting a good handle on the balance sheet. I think it's really intimidating for a lot of people. And if you didn't come from a corporate environment or public accounting where you had to go through every line on the balance sheet before you've actually closed month end, like that's part of our internal process.
And you said something important there that I think that, any bookkeeper could really take away from this is focusing on the balance sheet and going through every single line of the balance sheet. So when you go into public accounting, especially in audit, like we spend the majority of our time in the work that we do focused on the balance sheet, right? Yeah. Going through reconciling every cash account, every receivable account. And we set up a work paper file. And I still do this with my tax practice, is every single one of our business tax returns that we prepare, there's a work paper file where it's like, okay, you have the balance sheet and everything's tied out from the cash accounts, the receivables, the inventory, the fixed assets, the prepaid expenses, the accounts payable. And there's we use Google Sheets. And so we just have a separate tab that has like either a schedule that's built into the spreadsheet or something that we've done like more of a screenshot and pasted into the worksheet. But every single item on that balance sheet is tied out. Yeah. And I think that if you're able to do that as a bookkeeper, you're going to separate yourself from the majority of other bookkeepers just by making sure that you're focused on that, especially in the eyes of your clients.
Yeah. A lot of clients also don't understand the balance sheet. And so they may not understand the value in that. But the thing that I always come back to is like, if your balance sheet is correct, then your P&L is. So if you haven't gone through each line on the balance sheet, then we can't rely on your P&L. And the other thing, like you said, tying out the balance sheet, for anyone who maybe is unsure of what that means, it just means having supporting documentation or like you said, a spreadsheet or a schedule, matching the balance and explaining like what's in that balance. So if it's the AP, it's your AP aging, and you've actually looked at every line on the AP aging, making sure it's legitimate, not a duplicate or something.
No negative balances, right? Things like that.
Yeah. So it's not just matching the balances, but really understanding that those balances are valid, right? Because you can export the detail of the GL and have it match the balance sheet, but it could be absolutely wrong.
Absolutely. You make a good point there. Very true.
Something else. Thank you for bringing that up. What was
something else I'll just mention, something else that we do on the profit and loss itself is a lot of times we'll tie out all of the payroll, because with the payroll, that's something else that could get, get missed or it could be incorrect. And so we're always tying the payroll expenses out to like a 941 or, the year-end W-2s, making sure the officer salary agrees to their W-2. And so that's something else that's really important.
Yeah, I agree. That's something we have built into our year-end. Like we prepare basically a whole workbook in Excel or Google Sheets that we give to each of our clients at year end with the final numbers, a trial balance, fixed asset detail, all the things that we think their tax preparer is going to need. We just add a tab for it. Like charitable contributions, here's the detail. Owner's draw, here's the detail. Like every little thing that the tax preparer might have questions on, we add it. We tie out the W-2s. We list the number of 1099s that they've issued and all that good stuff. And yeah, most of our clients, tax preparers, don't end up having any questions because we've just handed it to them on a silver platter.
Absolutely. And that's how you can provide great client service by doing that. And if you're doing that, it's more of a self-check for your own mistakes as well. Cause it's like, okay, we've tied everything out each and every month.
Yeah.
You're going to notice things that are wrong.
Yeah.
Because if one item's wrong on the balance sheet, then that probably means there's something else wrong somewhere else.
Probably on the P&L.
Yeah, there's something going on.
Most likely, but maybe not. But yeah. Yeah.
So you mentioned Google Sheets, and maybe this is something we talk about, but I will say something about Google Sheets. It has been a game changer for me in the accounting profession, especially the way that we've deployed using that program within our firm.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that? Like, how is it a game changer and how you use it?
Well, so basically we operate and we track our entire workflow using Google Sheets. And the best part about it is, so like if I'm in there, I'm working with a client, and I think I was just mentioning this. And so we'll take and we'll put the trial balance or a balance sheet on one tab, and then a profit and loss on another tab. And then we'll use all of the subsequent tabs to actually add our supporting documentation to one single workbook.
Yeah.
But what I love about it is if you're working, so we have 2 offices, we've got one here, we've got one in Scottsdale, but if I'm working with another one of my employees, maybe I'm just in my office, is we're all in there in a shared setting, and we can work through things on a shared setting. I can leave comments, I can right click and leave a comment and it sends them an email. Mm-hmm. I can take, when I'm reviewing the work, I'll take the same exact workbook, I'll put it on one screen, and I might have my balance sheet sitting on one screen. And then on the other screen, I'll have the supporting documentation just in a separate workbook, but a separate session. So I can quickly tie out all the balance sheet back to the support. So from a review perspective, I love that too. But the sharing and the collaboration that's been introduced with that program, and Microsoft offers something similar. I just happen to use Google for it all, but I love it, and it has made a huge difference for our firm, the way that we communicate and present documentation anymore.
We'll be back after a quick break.
This episode of the Ambitious Bookkeeper podcast is sponsored by my brand new free training, The Ultimate Guide to Creating a Profitable Bookkeeping Business. In just 1 hour, you will learn 3 keys to creating and launching a profitable bookkeeping business. We will map out your path to creating a bookkeeping or accounting business that keeps you in control of your time, priorities, and expertise. From someone who built a 6-figure firm on part-time hours. That's right. You can stay in control of your time, keep family as your priority, and serve your clients well. It just takes a little strategy up front, and I'm going to help you with that during this free training. So head over to the show notes to sign up now for the next training and find out how you can choose the work you do, kick imposter syndrome to the curb, use tech to be super efficient, which all leads to a profitable business. Just head on over to ambitiousbookkeeper.com/training, and I will see you there. Yeah, I think Google Sheets is definitely better for a collaborative environment, like working on the cloud. I came from corporate, so there's functionality in Google Sheets that is like opposite of Excel. And so I kind of struggle with it.
Oh, I see.
But
Gotcha.
There's still we still use Google Sheets. That's what we export financials for our clients in Google Sheets and a PDF, so that because all of our clients they're online entrepreneurs as well. And most of them use Google Workspace. So it's very easy for them to just pop in there and look at things. But yeah, I do the same thing. Our balance sheet reconciliations are all in a Google Sheet, but you can also work with it in Excel and then just open it in Google Drive as a Google Sheet. So it makes it easier to collaborate, but there's some things that I just I have to do in Excel, and then I pop it into Google Sheets when I'm done.
Yeah. So I've kind of, or I should say our firm has kind of figured out how to actually operate in Google Sheets, similar to the way that I think most people would want to within Excel. We do conditional formatting, lookup formulas, filters, kind of all the things that you'd have to do that you'd want to use Excel for. Google Sheets does have those features. They're just a little bit different, and you have to figure out kind of how to use them. And we've invested a lot of time and effort to make sure that we figured it out because of the fact that we use this platform. But anyway, so I love it, and it's something that makes the collaboration for us so much easier. And the other aspects of that program that we've used, some people might kind of laugh, but then when they realize what we actually have done, they might say, wow, that's pretty interesting. So
can you give us an example?
Well, so we track, like during tax season, we have created, most people are familiar with like an engagement memo when it comes to a project, right? And so the engagement memo has the client name, maybe the amount of time that you've spent on that work, how you're going to deliver that work, which returns are going to be filed, kind of everything that you'd want to know to process that specific project or tax return, et cetera. So we've created a process, which is essentially using Google Sheets to manage, it's a spreadsheet that has taken place of a paper engagement memo. And just the way that we've utilized that has allowed us to go back, and we're tracking statistics year over year because we use this exact same format. And so we can compare and figure out the number of tax returns that have been prepared through a certain period of time, the dollar amounts of those tax returns, which staff has prepared a certain number of returns, and we can compare that to the prior year. And it's taken a long time to develop it, but I absolutely love it. And I'm excited to kind of further develop this to, essentially help manage the workflow of our firm.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier too, that you're not only using Google Sheets for like your actual work papers and things like that, but you're using it for this. And then you also said you're using it for managing the workflow. Does that mean you have like monthly checklists and stuff in there, or?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And you just use the filters. So like each staff would filter. So like if a staff member goes in there and they just filter on their workflow, you just filter out what your workflow is, and you can see specifically like which projects you have, the status of them, have they gone to review, and kind of where everything is at. But it's so convenient. For me, the way that I got to this point and the reason why I wanted to utilize this program is I remember early on in my career, I worked with a program called Go Systems. I think that's what the name of it was. But essentially it was a trial balance software. And I think it's an old school trial balance software. And I was using it a number of years ago when I first got into public accounting. And it's a trial balance software. And it had like an interface. And I always remember, like, I kind of knew like what was behind the scenes. It was essentially just using spreadsheets behind the scenes. And it had this interface that you could go to. But then I figured out, like, kind of somewhere along the way, how I could just like pull all the data behind the scenes and just work with it more or less in Excel and get the information that I wanted so much quicker from that program. And so I've always kind of been a believer of just understanding the data and the way that it works, but then you have to really be able to manage it from an interface standpoint. But I never liked interfaces because like sometimes they're customized and you can't make it do the things that you want it to do. So anyhow, that might be a little bit of a rabbit hole, but it's something that I am passionate about, and I love that these concepts and ideas that come out of it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. We use a project management software called Asana, but for like anyone listening, if you don't want to pay for an extra software, like this absolutely can be done in Google Sheets. Even in corporate, like we use Excel to track our month end. Like it was a giant checklist in one tab, and each month we would copy the tab, make a new tab, uncheck everything, and you'd have the column for like, prepared, reviewed, whatever. And
similar to that. Yeah. And there's drop downs. So we've got like drop downs where you start typing in the client's name and it's reading, like a data validation. Yeah. So it's reading like a data validation, and then the client pops right in there and you just kind of move it through. But anyhow, I love the efficiency of it, and just the collaboration. You can kind of see the work all happening in real time, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So the other question I have, like, we kind of got your backstory on what led you here. When did you realize that you were ready or really felt the pull to start your own thing?
Yeah. I think I've always been the type of person that is always trying to kind of figure out the next big thing, or try to do something in the profession or in my own career that's going to take me to that next level. So even when I first started in public accounting, I was always kind of anxious to get out and maybe start my own company and become an entrepreneur and do something kind of outside of the wing of my employer. But I also recognize the value of the training and the understanding of the profession that you can only get in an employment, setting.
Yeah.
And so I really appreciated that. And so I kind of knew in my mind that, I wanted to run my own business at some point early on, but I also knew that I wanted to have maybe like 5 to 7 years experience before I wanted to make that move. And so for me, it was just, kind of thinking to myself, do I have enough experience to get out there and essentially, chop the cord and go out, as an entrepreneur and go out on my own. And looking back on where I was, I think I was ready. I think I was ready to make that move. I certainly could have done a lot of things better, that's for sure. But I was ready. And sometimes you get out and if you're really serious and you're willing to put in the work, things just start to happen for you. Things just come together. I remember when I first went out on my own, I literally was going into my 6-month annual review with my employer. And I had decided a couple of days before that I was just gonna just go for it, just take the leap. And I remember I maybe had like $15,000 or $20,000 in my 401k, and I was living in a 1-bedroom studio with my wife and like 2 kids. And I was like, honey, I just want to make this happen, And I was like, somehow, some way, I'll just keep working hard and, we'll live cheap and just make it actually happen. And I decided that, and I'm sitting in my 6-month review, and the conversation, rather than going from, hey, how are you doing, went to, hey guys, I want to let you know that I'm going to go out on my own and going to try to make it, And I remember my boss kind of smirking at me. He's like, oh, so you're going to go strike out on your own, huh? And I'm like, well, I guess so. So anyhow, and I did, and I went out there, and I remember my first year, I was able to, I don't know, somehow just by myself with really no clients at all, just started working, doing some tax work and some other consulting jobs. I think I was able to rummage up like $50,000 in revenues just by myself without doing much, other than just working hard the whole year. And that was enough to get me by, and then the next year it did more and this and that, and now we're 10 years into the progression of our firm.
Wow.
But it was a big leap though. I mean, looking back on it, I was like, wow, but sometimes you just have to go for it. It's like if you're standing up there on a, you're going to jump off a cliff into the water, you know how you stand there and you go back and forth and you're not sure if you want to jump or not. I just jumped.
Yeah.
And you're fine.
I like that. Yeah. I appreciate the point you made about like kind of figuring out how much experience you wanted to have before you made that leap. Because a lot of people will come and be like, well, I don't know if I have enough experience to start out. I really want this, but like, so for someone that's kind of like juggling that decision right now, what do you think was one of the big indicators that you did finally feel like you had like the right amount of experience? Like, granted, we're always going to continue to learn. Like, you're always going to be a little underconfident, is that even a word, about your skills when you strike out on your own, even if you have 15, 20 years of experience, because it's just different being an entrepreneur.
Yeah. Well, in public accounting, I mean, I'm still learning something new every day.
Yeah. And
so that's always going to be the case. For me, it was after I had worked on some big jobs that I knew I was taking from start to finish. I was like, I know what I'm doing. Like I can go and I can provide a consulting service, and I can help clients that are in need take their books, which might be in kind of a mess, and I can help them get them to an audit level product where they could take that product and they could give it to an outside auditor, and they would be really happy. The auditors would be really happy with the workbooks and the documentation and just everything that I provided to them. So I knew I could take the process from start to finish and have more of a deliverable to provide. And so I knew I could do that, and that's what gave me that confidence to go ahead and make that move.
How did you, like, logistically, you knew that you were able to do that in the public accounting world because someone was overseeing your work and they're like, yeah, I have no feedback really, like no big corrections, just these tiny little things, right?
I think that's it, and it's not, for me, it wasn't like I was issuing audit reports at that time when I first started. So we were doing more like consulting services, which is a little less risk. It's like, okay, well, at least that's when I started. I was providing more consulting services where it's like, okay, I'm helping get all these schedules ready to go to the auditor, and maybe in some ways it was some bookkeeping that I was doing, right? But I was doing the bookkeeping and accounting kind of at a high level. And if I did make some mistakes, well, the auditors are the ones that might catch it, but it might be something small. But ultimately, I knew that what they got from me was, at least from the clients that I would get, and that's the reason they hired me, would be better than what they could produce because they needed my services. Mm-hmm. And so hopefully that gives some insight. But I just kind of knew, hey, I can get it to a certain point. And then, really, you just got to take some risk. Yeah. It's being an entrepreneur is all about taking risk. Yeah. And that part never stops. You're always taking risk. And so you've got to be willing to take some risks to reap those rewards. That's for sure. Yeah, for sure. So do you have, since you've been in business for 10 years, I'm sure you have at least one experience that stands out in your mind of like a big-ish mistake that you made, maybe with a client or, I don't know, within your firm, that at the time, maybe you felt like you were never going to be able to come back from it. Do you have a story like that to share? Gosh, well, I mean, there's lots of stories, right? I mean, we all make mistakes. What I will say is that, and knock on wood, being in the profession of public accounting and going into it, knowing that, hey, we're CPAs, we've got high ethical standards, we always strive to do the best that we can and really get the work right. I think that for the most part, even if you do make mistakes, if your intentions are good and you've been diligent in your approach, what I love about this profession is things can be corrected. Yeah. If you make a mistake, things can be corrected. You can amend a tax return. Obviously it's very rare that you'd want to amend an audit opinion. You rarely see that, but I suppose if that did happen, you could. I fortunately have not had that experience, but we've amended multiple returns over the years. My firm prepares 1,500 returns a year, something like that. And so every year it gets less and less, but let's see, mistakes that stand out. There's lots of them. I'll give you one that was kind of an interesting mistake. I had, when I left one of my employers a long time ago, I started doing some work for a client of theirs, a very large client, and this was a public entity. And I ended up in a bit of a dispute with my former employer. And I was only 2 years into the business at that point in time. And that had a big impact on me because here I was, and what are these, like these non-solicitation agreements that most everybody signs when they work for their employer. And so I was in kind of a dispute with my employer. And I had just started my company, I was 2 years into it. And I did a side job for a separate division of this organization. And my employer found out about it, former employer found out about it, and sent me a notice saying, hey, you can't do this. It's against your non-solicitation agreement. And so I wound up in a little bit of a legal battle. I will say that I said, you know what? I got two choices. Either I can cower and bow out, or I can go in strong and hard. And I did. I went in and I thought, I'm gonna go at this. I'm gonna try to beat these guys. I was kind of pissed off, and it wasn't about beating them, but it was about, stepping up, and I had to be brave. Yeah. And I had to take a stand. And essentially I hired a really good attorney to just write a letter for me and presented my position. And I stood up to them, and they backed down and left me alone. And it taught me a lot about, you got to be strong in business. and you got to be willing to be bold and make big moves. Otherwise you can get pushed around.
Yeah. I have a lot of like bookkeepers and students that I mentor that a lot of people come to me with that question of like, I have either a non-solicitation or a non-compete.
Yeah.
And I'm always like, well, for you were already 2 years out. Like it probably didn't even, maybe it wasn't, it expired at 3 years or something. Usually
it was something like that. It was like 2 years. Like I maybe had started something like that. It was like 2 years or a year and a half, but I was still within that time frame that where technically they thought I wasn't supposed to have been doing this.
Yeah. But like those are really hard to enforce. Like employers can make you sign them when you work for them, but at the end of the day, like they can be very difficult to enforce because you don't, that client could have come to you. It's not like you went and knocked on their door and were like, well, maybe you did, but
and part of it now is that, and I don't even think I have, maybe I do have my employees sign these, but I've had situations where I've had employees that have left my firm and started working with other clients. And the first time it happened, it upset me a little bit because they ended up taking just a couple of clients. But then I quickly realized, like, I'm so busy anyhow. And the clients that did end up going with this person were not really serving our firm all that well anyhow. Mm-hmm. And what I thought about just from an employer's perspective is like, if I'm not doing a good enough job to keep that client within my firm, then probably my fault that client has left with this other person versus them taking the client. So that's how I look at it anymore. And I don't, as an employer, I'm not even worried about that. And so I would tell your audience, people that are out there, if they have concerns about that, I mean, it's just something they've got to think through. But most of the time, the employers, they're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah. I think that self-reflection is really important. Like I always come back to like, what role did I play in this failing or this not going the way that I wanted? Like I always have some sort of responsibility to that. So like you said, like, okay, well, what did we do wrong where the client decided to go with, that employee? And maybe nothing. It could have just been like they had a really good relationship or really good rapport and they wanted, to have continuity of who was doing their books or whatever, right? It's usually not personal. Yeah.
It's tough. Rejection is one of the most difficult parts of the business, right? If a client leaves you, just that rejection from the client is really difficult, but you get used to it. There's lots of difficult things in running a business, but that's just one of them, and you get used to these things. You got employees that might leave, or you might have to let somebody go, or a client fires you, or you have to fire a client. These are all really difficult decisions and things that you have to deal with as an employer, and they're not fun, but you got to run a business, and people are going to do their own thing sometimes. So
exactly. Okay,
I don't know if you had this on your list, but can we talk about like the employee-employer environment out there right now, just kind of in our profession?
Yeah, let's do that. What you got?
Well, I guess I was just kind of thinking back to when COVID happened, especially in public accounting. One of the big things was employees were kind of moving all around, right? And so you're thinking, wow, I had these people for this amount of time, and then they've left our firm. That's a challenge, and I know that a lot of firms out there have had challenges with employees kind of coming and going. I think that's changed a little bit, but I guess one of the things for me is that I've always really for our firm, we've really prided ourselves in developing staff, and bringing people up, not necessarily hiring experienced professionals, but developing new professionals. And to me, our firm, we've always been able to kind of fill those coffers. We've always been able to say, hey, we've got that kind of next man up mentality. But just from your perspective as well, I'd just be curious, like, what have you kind of seen from COVID and the labor market to where it is today?
I see lots of different perspectives. I think if you are working on the cloud or have like a virtual environment, like you definitely have an advantage because people want to work in that environment. What becomes more challenging is, like you said, you have to create the time to develop the talent. because those really experienced professionals are probably going to be out of your budget, maybe.
Yeah, and they're just hardly out there. And if you're a good experienced professional, you're either doing your own thing or you're working for somebody else, and hopefully they're taking good care of you.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're few and far in between, I feel like, anymore. If you think you're going to hire just an experienced professional, it's going to be a difference maker for your firm. That's tough.
Yeah. So making sure you make the time. And this is where a lot of people get kind of stuck in limbo of like, I'm so busy, I need help, but I don't have time to train or to develop the talent. So it's like, you kind of have to prepare for the rush way before you're ready. Like I try to give this example, but last year, or over a year ago now, I guess it was the fall of 2021. I knew I wanted to have a new team member join us by January. So I started recruiting in like October because I was like, I don't know how long it's going to take. And that it can take 3 to 4 months to recruit the right person if you're serious about building a good culture. And that person ended up starting in January, but we would have been strapped, right? If I had waited until I actually needed the person. So sometimes it's a little leap of faith, like jumping before the net is there. But if you know in the future, like you're planning for growth, you're planning to bring more clients on, you're going to stifle the client growth if you don't make the hire and develop that person ahead of time.
Absolutely. We have a pretty good internship program here at our firm. And so we're constantly trying to develop at least 2 or 3 interns at a time.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that we've got kind of that next person that's, that we can train and develop and bring them into our professional staff. That's really the goal is, but if you get good, smart people that are, well educated and work hard, I've found that our team, because we've got, now we've got, I don't train the interns anymore. My senior and associate staff, they all do. And so it used to be that I had to, but now we've kind of grown to the point where, but knowledge is contagious.
Yeah.
And that's something that I've noticed is that we can get somebody up to speed really fast, especially now in our 10th year versus where we were maybe in our 5th year or 6th year. The way that we train and teach people has become so much more effective. And so that's been a game changer for our firm, just our ability to train and develop people. Yeah. And I invested a lot of time, effort, money, everything, that I could to have this kind of setup. And, it takes a lot, to do that. But, we've always staffing has never been an issue for us. I mean, would we want to have more experienced staff? I mean, everybody does, but we've always had the ability to deliver for our clients and had plenty of people that can get the work done. And now it's opened up new opportunities, so now we've got this really robust staff and group of people that, if we want to do something else or other moves, so we have the ability to do that. It's good to be able to deliver for your clients.
Yeah. What do you think is one of the big components of your training program or the way that you develop staff that was like a big game changer for you?
Well, to be honest, it's more or less just having that comfort level and just being comfortable asking another staff for help. Like we try to develop our work culture is that we all help each other. I mean, I have an open door policy. If somebody has a question for me, I'm always willing to help them and help them figure something out. And that goes from me all the way down to all my seniors and associates and everything. We communicate openly and we all really enjoy each other's presence for the most part. Not everybody gets along perfectly, but for the most part, that's ingrained in our culture as a willingness to help and really want to make sure you help somebody else get it right. And so we try to eliminate this kind of environment where like you're kind of afraid to ask your neighbor because you think you might get yelled at or they might think down on you or tell somebody, hey, this question, they didn't know this or that. It's never about that. It's always about making sure that we give you the best experience. We teach you whatever we can to get you up to speed. And if you don't cut it, well, then you don't cut it. But most of the time we find that we bring out the best in people because we do provide that type of environment.
Yeah, that's so important. That's amazing. Yeah. All right. So we're getting close to time. The other question that I wanted to ask you was about your firm growth. So you started 10 years ago. And when we met, you were talking about how a lot of the growth that you've had has been through well, I don't know a lot of it, but a portion of it has been through acquisitions.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk about like maybe like your first acquisition and how that went versus like
Sure.
your most recent?
Yeah, I'll give you a quick elevator story of it. So I think I was talking earlier about how I started my business and I was able to kind of rummage up like $50,000 maybe in my first year. And I think in my second year, well, even in that first year, what I noticed, because I was getting out and I was networking with other CPA firms in town, and I was going to them saying, hey, I started my own firm. If you have any extra business, please send it my way because I'm looking for work. And I found that other CPA firms were willing to like send me their overflow because they were busy. And so I thought, okay, well, that's a pretty good program. I'm going to get out and I'm going to meet more CPAs. And it was sometime in my second year, I walk into this small CPA practice here in town. And when I walked in, the administrative assistant, she was on the phone with a client and she was telling this client that the practitioner, the CPA, was like sick and he was in the hospital and she didn't know his status. And this was like February of 2015, I think it was. February of like 2015. So it was right in tax season. And so I gave her a couple of my cards and I was like, hey, if there's anything I can do to help you guys, let me know. Just out there looking for business. I had lots of time, no money, lots of time at that point, And so I was out networking. And the son of this CPA calls me and he's like, look, my dad's in the hospital, he's sick, and we've got this whole firm and we want to see if there's any way that you can help us. And said, well, yeah, let me see what I can do. And I went down and I met the CPA, the guy that was sick, and he was down in like a care facility. And I sat and I talked to him and told him a little bit about my background, and right there, like kind of made like a business proposal with him to buy his practice from him. And he looks up at his son and he says, or no, his son looks up at him and he says, Dad, do you want to think about this and get back to Stephen on this? And he says, nope, I want to do it. And we literally shook hands right there. And I bought this little firm from him that the family financed to me. And it was like $80,000 worth of business. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, he ended up dying like a week or two later. So he knew, like when I talked to him, that he was not doing good. And so here I was, I took on this little tax practice, hardly knowing what I was doing. I was just going to follow his work papers and, compare everything.
See what they did last year.
Yeah, right. Trying to figure it out, and I did. And I was able to hire a few people from the local college because of that. And then from there, I thought, well, heck, I did it once. I'm going to do it again. And I went to another guy that I had met years before and asked him, hey, you're interested in selling your practice? He said, oh, yeah, sure. And I was just surprised that these guys are ready to retire and they want to really sell. And I positioned myself in the market because and at that point, every time I would acquire a firm, I would hire multiple interns and other employees to come in and help me do the work. Mm-hmm. And we ended up doing a $1 million deal and some other smaller deals. And, I think up to this point, I've acquired like 6 or 7 practices.
Wow.
Yeah. And then also have built my own legacy clientele all along the way, today. And so we're up to somewhere between, close to 2.5 million annual revenues.
Wow.
I would love to talk more about all of the acquisitions and everything that goes into it, because it's a whole other topic just in itself.
Yeah, we're going to have to do part 2 for sure. Because I'm very curious on that front, as far as like my end goal has always been to get my firm to a point to sell it, because that's, it's just a goal I have. It's not like necessarily my retirement plan, but it's one of those things that like, that's always been part of my vision. So I want to know what it like from both angles, how to best prepare. And then also like, if that involves growing through acquisition before I sell too, you know what I mean?
So many challenges. And I thought about this earlier, and, one of the things, if I could go back and do it all again, I would have been so much more ready for the scaling that I would need to have done through all of that. And obviously, knowing what you know now, you want to go back and you want to say, okay, well, these are all the processes and these are the programs, and this is how I would do things up front that would help me so much more later on as I grow, that I wish I could have done. But sometimes you just got to learn this stuff on the fly. And maybe it's now. I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe now we're to the point where we're still somewhat small enough where, I mean, who knows, maybe our processes become, maybe we develop those, because I haven't done an acquisition now in like 3 or 4 years. So that was all kind of earlier on. And I haven't needed to, just because once you get to a certain size, all of a sudden, all of your clients, if you do good work, all of your clients are going to start referring business to you. People in the community, they kind of know who you are. They're going to refer business to you. And so we've just grown quite a bit just on our own over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Which has been really nice. But yeah, I mean, there's been an extra focus on just our process. And I wish I had the processes that I had today 5 or 6 years ago. I'd be in a completely different place. But yeah, that's how it goes.
Yeah. Hindsight.
Hindsight, right.
Awesome. Well, yes, we're definitely going to have to do a part 2 all about acquisitions.
Yeah.
But if somebody is interested in connecting with you, where is the best place to reach out to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously our website would be one place. I'm not much of a social media guy, but I do use Instagram. So it's Steven_the_CPA. That's my Instagram handle.
All right. We'll link it in the show notes.
I don't post anything on there. I would love to be, someone that could get to, I wish I could do more on that front, where I could share more information if people are interested in hearing from me anyhow, and have more of an online presence from, social media presence. But maybe that's something that I'll do in the future here. I've been stuck on the farm. You start a business like this and it takes everything to make sure that it all goes and happens. But I'm starting to have more time now, I feel like, with all the people that have helped me do this. But our website is scaaasolutions.com, and that's another way to contact me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It's been a pleasure being able to talk with you, and I'm looking forward to having you back.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who helps make this podcast possible. Content and interviews are produced by me, Serena Shu. Our intro and outro music is written and performed by my brother, Ian Gilliam. Editing is also by Ian, using his awesome sound engineering skills along with Descript software. Hosting and publishing is by Buzzsprout, and you can check out the show notes for links to all of these amazing resources and resources mentioned in the episode.
Be ambitious.